Good afternoon, everybody. I assume we're all basically in the same time zone. Andrew Singer coming at you live from the Orange Room here in Baltimore. The topic today is selling in the new normal. So all of you right now are sitting somewhere that you normally weren't sitting before when you were doing the job that you're still trying to do. What I'm going to try to do is help you kind of think through what's going on in the new normal today, possibly make some adjustments, and hopefully answer some questions or learn something from you, hopefully, if you have some comments to make. I have a few things that I'd like to go through. Hopefully, some things are new, some things are old, some things are just a different take on things. But let's start with a cute little story that happened to one of my salespeople over this past weekend. So over this past weekend, and that's what they have in America is weekends. Over this past weekend, somebody wanted to have a barbecue, and they went out to their normal place where they get all their barbecue. Didn't really think twice about it. Drove into town, and when they got there, they pulled into the parking lot of what was now an empty butcher shop. Pulled into the parking lot, nobody there, nothing going on. Oddly enough, a man walks outside with the normal butcher apron on, approaches the car, kind of looks familiar, knocks on the window. Everybody has their mask on. Hey, what's going on? And the person who works for me said, hey, I was just going to come by and pick up some stuff for my barbecue. He said, well, did you go on the website? Have you made an order? He said, oh, I didn't realize. And my guy looks at the butcher and he says, how are you doing? How are things going here? Are you doing all right with the COVID stuff and everything? He looks at him and says, wow, thanks for asking. Things have never been better. He said, I'm selling more in a day than I was doing in 2 weeks. Really? What are you doing? Well, when the whole thing started, within the first 2 days, I brought in some smart guy that the family knew. He got my website up and going again, changed things out, made it easier to use. I let a lot of my existing customers know when they called in, hey, do you mind going to this website? I quickly converted a lot of my workers to basically people either taking phone orders or looking at stuff on the web or calling people. Next thing I know, we're busier than we've ever been before. And my guy said, thank you so much. I appreciate it. He said, I guess I'll go home and make an order. He said, don't worry about it. I know somebody inside. I'll get you in. So he said, I'm going to put you at the top of the line. There are 80 orders waiting, but I'm going to get you on top. So why am I telling you this? First of all, that butcher's coming outside looking like one of our grandparents, I'm sure, with the blood on the apron and the knife in one hand and the hat on. Can I help you? What's going on? Little do you know that this person completely adapted to the new normal within 48 hours. His business was not only running, it was running than it ever did before. But let's look at the other side of what was going on here. I had my salesperson out there just on the weekend, not working for me on the weekend. But what did he do that made that butcher want to help him at that moment? He was curious. Now, curiosity is a basic sales issue. It's a basic thing you should have. It's being inquisitive. If you're selling properly, and this is Sales 101, in an hour, you're speaking fewer than 18 minutes, but you all know that already. But he was curious. Not only was he curious because that's a natural sales skill, he was curious about how this person had adopted to what was going on. How many people get emails now where the first line is, hey, I hope you and your family are well? How many people get a text that says, hope you're doing okay, ... and something else happens? This is not by accident that people are doing this. If you're not inquiring, looking into how people are doing and recognizing the new reality with your clients, with your prospects, with a cold call, whatever you're doing, you are already starting from below ground zero. That inquiry, that sincerity, that authenticity, as discussed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, is what's making the difference between people that are adapting to what's new and normal now and people that aren't. And you may think, well, of course I'm asking. I'm a mensch, I'm a menchette. I'm asking what's going on with somebody. Not everybody is. Do you know why? Because people are anxious. People are stressed out. People are having their moments. Everybody that was stressed out when the pandemic started and it finally calmed down, turned on the TV, opened the newspaper, started reading their news feed, and got stressed out again when they saw all the horrible things happening again in this country. So people are stressed out and anxious. And as I talked about with my team here in Baltimore and around the country, everybody's got their moments. You've got young people trapped in their house with their kids. Who knows how to take care of their kids? You have people that are taking care of older parents, older friends, partners, people that are alone. There's crazy stuff going on, and people are stressed out. And on their mind is not you. You are not the first thing on their mind right now. So by a sincere and authentic inquiry, by being curious and being sincerely curious, You are starting yourself in a better position than you were before. Let's talk about it. So selling in the new normal. First off, you're 6 feet apart. Well, does that mean you're standing on one side of the street and somebody else is standing on the other side of the street? No, that's not what's happening. Does it mean that you have a string in between two orange juice cans for those of us that might have had a childhood in the 70s? No, that's not what's happening. But it does mean you've adjusted to what you're doing. Maybe you're in a place right now where you can actually go take somebody out to lunch. Don't know if somebody wants to have lunch with you or sit anywhere. What's probably happening is very similar to what we're doing now. Or if you're old school, you've got a dial phone on your desk and you're calling people, and hopefully you're trying to make your voice sound friendly, nice, and inquisitive and sincere. But hopefully, we'll talk about this about technology in a few minutes, but hopefully this is probably what's going on. So what is that 6 feet apart look like for you? You need to establish what your new way of doing business is. Now, I may be late to the game. Maybe you did that for the last 3 months, and that's great. How is it working for you? Is it working or isn't it working? You should be assessing your style and grace on this new online world on an hour by hour, day by day basis. There are articles all over LinkedIn, all over the web. Find people that you trust. Look at Business Week, look at the Wall Street Journal, see what's happening on LinkedIn. People are giving you updated, quote unquote, best practices. And I'm sure somebody will charge you some money to tell you what your best practice should be. That's a side note. But what you should be doing is assessing what you're doing. Like right now, I don't know if the orange is working or not. Jonathan looks really good, but I know that's a fake background that he has behind him. It's not really an office. He's sitting in a basement in Brooklyn somewhere. Nobody knows. Anyway, you want to assess what it is that's going on a regular basis to know how it's working. This whole thing is what's working. Everything these days is 6 feet apart and from the waist up. All right? 6 feet apart. Next up, old school. If I'm speaking like this and you can see my face, you understand that I don't sound that happy. If I just go like this, like old days, with a mirror next to me, or you can see myself, smiling and dialing if someone can't see you, or even if you're speaking, makes all the difference in the world as long as your smile is real or not real. You need to make sure that what you're doing, once again, the word is there, sincere and authentic. And I don't know if that's part of your sales mojo or not, but it should be, because that's all that basically works in the year 2020. If you're faking it and you're old school dinosaur, the last of your clients is the last of your clients. You need to be adapting and overcoming, but that's a speech from before the pandemic. This is what's going on now. So the old way of smiling, dialing, or making sure that your presentation, regardless of whatever it is the best it can be at that moment. And make sure that your eyes and facial expression and everything else is conveying the true concern of what's going on. If you don't know right now that I want everybody that's listening to this to be more successful in their business, then I'm failing. I want you to be more successful. That's why I'm taking the time to do this. That's why Jonathan's taking the time and everybody else. I want you to be more successful. So that should be coming across in your persona. That should be coming across in your voice. And that should be what you're conveying. Once again, not necessarily new information, but sometimes it helps to hear it again. And maybe if you play back something that you've done over the last few weeks that didn't go well, think about possibly why it didn't. You can't get on the phone or a video call if you're in a bad mood. But Andrew, what about if the kid's screaming in the background? That's okay. The only thing not okay are flushing toilets. Kids in the background are okay. Lawnmowers outside, street noise, not broken glass. That's kind of scary. Sirens are okay. Many of us are in cities. I'm in Baltimore. It's the thing that goes on all the time, unfortunately. Flushing toilets, not good. Every other sound basically gets a pass these days, so don't freak out. And the other thing is nobody needs to know whether you're a good parent, good grandparent, or not. So one of these, that doesn't work. Stay with it. If somebody crawls into a room or a dog barks, it's okay. All right. Next up. I'm a true believer in a sales process called Challenger Sale. It's all over online. It was put together by the corporate executive board a long time ago. I get no money for talking about it, but it is what selling in the 2000s is all about. And I just want to mention it to repeat it. Challenger selling means, I'll put it succinctly, if your client isn't necessarily thinking that they would potentially pay you about $500 an hour just because of the information and expertise you're either conveying or have the ability to convey, you are not doing them the service they're looking for. Let me say that again. If you have not put your client in the position where they see the expertise in you, in your product or service, number one, and hopefully growing into what their business is, then you have homework to do. So if you are selling a widget to a business and you don't know everything about your widget and how it applies, you need to. And you can go back and read Malcolm Gladwell and figure out that an expert is 10,000 hours. I'm not going to hit that now. That's what selling is about. But it's also in the challenger sale mode, it's no fear. It doesn't mean being mean, obnoxious, or having crazy courage. It means that when your client says something that's not good for them, you challenge them and say, inquisitive. Have you considered X, Y, and Z? How might this product affect your, Did you consider this, which I remember happened last year? You're showing them a concern for their business. You're showing your expertise in your own product, and you're making the connection for them with your insight into that. You're not supposed to do the 1+ fill in the blank. No. You fill in the blank and take your customer or prospect down the road with you. That's through questions, through small challenges, inquiries. That should be the natural mode of what you're doing. And the reason I bring it up is not to give a sales 101 course, but it's to remind you that where you think you're best in person, they can never say no when I'm doing one of these, or I'm doing one of these, or I'm doing, that's my magic. You need to make sure that that magic that you have is valuable, up to date, does not label you a dinosaur, and is easily conveyed in this mode. I want to talk one more moment about the mode that we're in here. A lot of clients, if you're selling something new, don't necessarily understand what's going on. You need to find something that they understand. What do I mean? You need to look for examples. You need to figure out how to use the slide function or the picture function if it's available to you on the video mode you're doing, or find one that does, because you're not going, here, look at this chart, or hold it up and say, hey, look at that. That's not going to work. So if you have a slide, it has to be of value at that moment, and it can't be an eye chart. It can't be, what can I make? That doesn't work either. Big pictures, big messages, and help people understand things. For existing clients, now we're going into what if somebody's a bit anxious? What if someone's slightly panicked? I need this you know that your client needs to buy something within the next month or so. Their contract's up. They need to replenish stock. They need something. They can't get their head around it. Maybe they're scared they're going to get fired. I mean, I sell a lot to higher education. Right now, colleges in the United States aren't even sure if they're opening in September. Do you want to be a facilities manager at a college not knowing if you have a facility to manage? Do you want to be a this somewhere if you don't even know if you have a job at the end of all of this? So people are under stress. So what can you do with them? Walk them back to better times. Pull up a chart from last year at this time and say, remember when we were last year and we looked at this, and show it to them. Oh yeah, remember. And you see how we performed to budget or how things went? Yes. Look at column A. We have to make an adjustment now for what's happening. Would you say it's a 10% reduction or a 5% increase? This is what I think it might be based on what you've told me. And you take them from the old picture to a new picture. Sounds basic, but it's not, because people need something they can hold on to. Think about what you're doing in your world right now. What's going on in your life? You have more time at home or wherever you are than you've ever had before. People are seeking out familiarity, right? We're going to look back on this one day and say, oh, why didn't I lose 20 pounds? How come I'm not running a marathon? How come I didn't read this, do that, etc.? But from a sales perspective, you should be thinking about, what are the tools that I'm thinking about now that I can be employing to help someone in the same way that I know I'm helping myself? People are seeking out familiarity. How many times have you had the same dinner over the last 3 months because it tastes good, it makes you feel good? People are doing a lot of things by rote and by habit. Help people see that when they're buying something from you as well. That's something that's been very strong for me and for my team over the last 3 months. Dumb question. Suppose you're selling and all you got is your cell phone. Does your cell phone work? How many people know that T-Mobile was out yesterday instead of banging their phone against the table? I was trying to get through to somebody. I almost put my iPhone through a window. I was very annoyed. I didn't know what was going on. My whole house, nobody could get through to anybody. I assumed it was me because I'm the old guy in the house. I can't work the phone. T-Mobile was down. I would have known that if I did what my 18-year-old did, which was just Google, phone's not working. And it was said, hey, America, T-Mobile's down for a little while. Didn't know that. I have Verizon. I couldn't get through to somebody that had T-Mobile. Why is that important? Everything is out there right now. All information is out there. You can literally Google anything. My head hurts, Google already knows. Google it and find out. Google knows too much, actually, but that's a separate issue. Does your phone work? I only have a flip phone. Yeah. Does it work? Does your camera work on your computer? These are silly little things to ask, and I know we're 3 months into it, but for those of you that are still have a camera that's making you look like this, it's not okay anymore. And if you think it's okay, the person that just took your business looks amazing on a Mac right now, or they look as good as Jonathan and I do right now, at least as Jonathan does. So you need to make sure that everything's actually working. Once again, this is not something that I've come up with some amazing idea, but how many of you actually thought about, well, I wonder why I'm not getting this business or something? Because if you're on a bad computer or bad video or bad audio, or you don't check to see, hey, can you hear me? Just like we did in the middle, we waited until it was working perfectly. You then wonder, where'd my business go? I'll tell you where your business went. Your business went to somebody who looks good from the waist up, speaking nicely on a good computer, and is nice and clear. That's where it went right now. It's important.
Very good points. Very, very good point. A lot of people don't think about these things, right? We have so much time on our hands, at least in the last 3 months. Things change. So when we're at home not doing anything, and it's like you ask yourself the question, well, why am I not spending this time productively adapting to a new situation? And like you said before, it's because I'm caught in the news, I'm caught in the anxieties, I'm caught in a new situation. I'm worried about what this person is going to think or that person is going to think and whatnot. And one of the tricks that I use in Zoom calls, webinars, or whatever the case is with somebody on that call is to have a preliminary conversation with them and let them know, hey, I'm a family man. I have 4 kids at home. I'm not in an office right now. Things are going to be happening. My 3-year-old is going to come and poke their head right into the video in the middle of our call. And when you let people know these things, kind of in advance of what's happening in your reality, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's no there's no bad reaction. There's no negativity because, like you said, people are used to it. But it makes it so much more comfortable for the individual if they can just accept their reality and they're in right now and speak about it freely. It's all right, right? You don't know the next guy, like you said, is having a virtual background and is in, is not wearing pants while he's talking to you from right stuff. You have no clue. But just ease it for yourself in these conversations and make yourself look good. Check those cameras, check those mics, check all these things. It's super important. Great point.
Yes. Yeah. Charlie Harari this morning, he said, when times are good, it's time to make a living. And when times are bad, it's time to make a fortune. So my challenge to all of you, as I'm sure Charlie said this morning, is what are you doing in these bad times to change things? And a term that came up to me was something I saw very in the beginning. There was an article and an interview, which is something I was going to mention, but since Jonathan brought it up, it's helpful, is we in America use this term remote work. Well, what it becomes is basically taking everything you would normally do in a day and just putting it on your computer or putting it on a screen. But you're still having every single meeting that might or might not be productive. You're still only potentially seeing 2 clients a day because that's how long it took you to go see somebody on a plane, a train, or an automobile, as opposed to the term this company was using in Europe is distributed work, which is this is the way business is now being done. What do you mean I can actually speak to 8 clients in a day? I don't have 8 clients to speak to in a day. Well, maybe that's your new challenge. If you have hour meetings with people and you have a work day that people can work with you of 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours, maybe you should be seeing 12 clients a day, or maybe you should be checking in. All of these things are a new way for you to challenge yourself and to potentially get to the level where, why am I not disrupting somebody else, or if somebody disrupting me and I don't even realize it? And the other word you hear a lot of is this pivot word. Did you pivot? Did you pivot? For those of us who grew up playing basketball, it's like only one pivot. If you do 2, you walk. But did you pivot? The pivot means is what have you changed? What are you doing differently? Right? You had 3 months. What are you doing differently? And what are you doing to change things up so that you're more successful than before? Wait a minute, my product doesn't sell in this time. So you got another product? You have clients. What do they need? Have you spoken to them? They're all restaurants. Okay, great thing to talk about. Restaurants having a rough time. What can you do for them? You have the ability of not being stressed out in an owner of a restaurant right now, but you still need to sell something to them. What could you possibly help them with? I don't know offhand, but what could you do?
I heard a great example.
That's the way you start thinking.
I heard a great example of a restaurant owner in Montreal who pivoted his business to start creating and making food baskets with surprise foods inside, selling it to their clients. So the clients,
Mm.
instead of rushing to a grocery store where they're not comfortable, there's no social distancing, they don't know what to do, they get their restaurateur coming to them and readying for them these great food baskets with meats and cheeses and vegetables and surprise dishes and all kinds of stuff. And they bite and it lasts them for the week, and it keeps them top of mind. That's the thing, right? Because they
Hmm.
say, wow, look at this person. He's servicing our community. He's relevant to us today. He cares. He's in the food
Right.
business and he's worried about us having to schlep to those grocery stores packed with people. And he's doing this in a convenient way. Yeah, it might cost a little bit more, but at the end of the day, it's so much more worth it. It's a
Right.
sacrifice worth making.
Take it one step further. I was speaking at a conference last week, and it was the lunch break. So we all joked around, and somebody said lunch is sponsored by one of these companies. So we all raised our hands and said, "Hey, what's for lunch?" You know, we're all sitting in our houses, and then next thing we know, pops up on our screen a coupon for Uber Eats. So the company it sponsors everybody to get a coupon from Uber Eats and to order something that was whatever this coupon was for, but they were treating us to lunch. And that's the way they
Absolutely.
did it. And you can read articles everywhere about that. You can have a lunch date with somebody where you've ordered for them, or you say, "We're having pizza. Where would you like me to order from for you?" Or "This is what we're doing." All of these things are creative. And as Jonathan said, they keep you top of mind and they separate you from somebody else. And it also shows the sincerity. So just because you're able to save money on some things doesn't mean you should save money on all things right now. So you can take the gas money or the flight money and use it for something that makes a difference. I knew a few weeks ago one of my salespeople was basically trapped in their skyscraper in New York City in their apartment. So we all took turns ordering lunch for her. She could afford her own lunch, but it meant the world to her that her teammates were thinking of her and that she had lunch delivered. She was going to order it anyway, but we did it before she did, and it lifted her spirits and it made her feel better. It's little things. And you know what those little things are? They're the things you wish somebody was doing for you, but they're not. Go do it for somebody else. I have a few more things I want to share with you. Hopefully you have some questions. Hopefully somebody's listening besides Jonathan and Alan. Okay. Make
No,
sure
go
that you
ahead.
decide what technology you want to use. It's important to look at technology. It's whatever you want to do. There's Google Hangouts, there's Zoom, there's Microsoft Teams, there's Skype. Some companies, if you're selling into a larger company, like my company, will not let anything on the system that's not Microsoft. So when I have a Zoom call or I have this call I'm on right now, I have to be on another machine. I can't be on my company machine because of security issues. It doesn't mean this is insecure. It just means it's not going to work. So it's important to know ahead of time what software works, what programs work. And if all else fails, you can always do a FaceTime if you're both on an Apple product, do a Zoom call on your phone, on your private product, ask somebody what they can do, find out how they can get connected to you. You don't want to be the person who sets up a call with 5 people and finds out 3 of them can't get on at the last minute because of security issues, machine issues, Wi-Fi issues. How many people could handle Wi-Fi for maybe one video call, and now they have 10 people on the line and it starts breaking up and goes down? I had to have the Wi-Fi upgraded in my house because I couldn't handle everything that was going on for work. It just, I was blowing up the Wi-Fi in the house between myself and the kids doing their schoolwork and everything. These are little things that you have to think about ahead of time. You need to complete, I don't know how many people have this. I have my stupid list next to my desk at work. It's like, what else stupid could happen? And then you go through the list so it never happens. And there's always something new. So the new stupid list is hey, by the way, do you have good Wi-Fi? It's like, do you want to do it this way? Do you want to start with a phone call? These things help because if you're prepared for a call for 6 hours and then somebody can't see the amazing thing you put on, then it was all for naught. I'll mail it to you. Don't worry about it. That doesn't look very good either. Um, those are the main things that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to adjust adapting. I wanted to adjust thinking about things differently. Don't just convert your business to look, now I'm on a computer. Think about what you're doing, inquire how people are doing, be curious, challenge your clients, be different than everybody else, think ahead, and always ask and always recognize what's going on. If you normally are a one meeting closer, recognize people's anxiety and panic, maybe it'll take 2 or 3 meetings. Maybe it'll take a month where it didn't before, but you will be remembered as the person that's taking the time to do something as opposed to where we are before. I see Alan has a question. If I could look at it,
Go
that's
for it.
okay.
For sure.
If I want to start a side gig, I love gig, but it's in a different industry that I'm currently in. I create a separate LinkedIn profile. How do I blend these two income sort? Blend these two. So I'm not sure what you're asking because you're kind of answering the first question, Alan, which is you've basically created another profile on LinkedIn. So my thought would be is one of your profiles says Alan, and maybe the other profile says Widgets Incorporated, and Alan just happens to be the CEO. So that's what I'm thinking. But if you're saying is how do I blend the two, if you know the two services or the two companies somehow are complementary of each other, you can begin to have your crowd on LinkedIn connect and see both by asking the people closest to you to make those connections for you initially, that they're recognizing, recommending, and creating a bit of a buzz, if you will, and then see what kind of begins to come out of it. But you also need to make sure that you haven't literally bifurcated yourself. And if you were making $1 million a year, you're now not making 500 or 500, but you're trying to get to 1 + 1 = 3. I'm not sure if I answered you. They're not complementary. The clients are totally different.
So I think maybe what he might be referring to is that his first company is maybe linked to his personal brand. A lot of people do that on LinkedIn, whereas they start a
Okay.
company and they promote it as themselves on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and it's linked to that. And now they start a second company. And it's like, okay, do I create a new profile? So
Okay.
people
Great.
create profiles for their companies, right? They create company pages on LinkedIn so they can have their own identity, if you want, as a personal brand, and then they can have their companies have their own. The difficulty with that, and I've gone through it, is that to manage your company page, you have to be as active on your company page posting as you are active on your personal brand, because if you don't, then you won't get any followers on your company pages and they're going to keep reverting back to you. So unless the person finds a way to connect his personal brand to both his companies in what he's offering as services, and people can relate to that one profile, then you'll probably have a harder time, right, selling both of them
Yeah.
on social media.
It's also the challenge of creating the brand around the company itself. Challenge to see if you can create a brand around the company, that it's not just you, if you will. I was gonna. It's a softball, actually. I mentioned to Jonathan, my 18-year-old son wanted to learn all about YouTube businesses, how to start a YouTube business, what to do with it. He's learning everything, and he didn't have a product. So what was our pandemic project? Was my son turned me into his project. So he basically started a YouTube channel, which I'm not getting any revenue from, called Guilt, Gylt, Get Your Life Together. And he's actually had me produce some videos for him, and he's putting on other information. But what he decided to do was, because I can't cross it with my business persona, because I'm not going to place my own business at risk in what I do, was he placed it on YouTube and on Instagram. I didn't have a presence on Instagram. So he created a channel on Instagram called Guilt, Gylt. It's Guilt 0167 if you want to take a peek. All it is stuff about interviewing skills, networking skills, business skills, stuff that we're discussing. He's trying to learn that business. So he's trying to learn it with an Instagram promotion of YouTube, and he's using two different things. So the other thing you may want to consider is maybe moving away from LinkedIn and see if you can establish the other complementary business in a different on a different platform, which may work as well. It's a different platform. It's a different grouping. There's Facebook as well, depending on the age group that you're going after. I hope that's helpful.
So on a previous talk with Brian Scudamore and Roy Williams, they were talking about. Roy was speaking about how marketing actually helps a company grow, and he says that it can't help a company unless that company was going to be successful to start with. What marketing does in the end, and branding does, is that it accelerates the success of a company that was going to be already successful without the marketing in the first place. Now, what he says, what is branding? He defines it as somebody's personality, as a personality in itself. And when he creates a brand behind a company, he always tries to link it to the founder's personality as well, right? So when it links, one is going to exemplify and amplify the other as much as possible, kind of like on steroids. So in Alan's question, if you can create a brand personality behind your companies that are related to your own personality, then it's going to make it much easier for you to sell under one platform, under one person, one identity, versus multiple identities, and you won't have to spread yourself too thin across the board.
Great. Other questions, anybody? I know there are a few of you out there.
So you made some interesting points before in your conversation about building relationships with the people that are in front of you, being concerned about them when you're trying to sell. But people still feel those jitters, that anxiety, that fear, like you were mentioning before, when it comes to selling. Right? You might be passionate about your product, but you're always afraid. And one of the fears that people get into is being rebutted by a potential client, right? Which is like, man, I don't really need your service, or yeah, no, this doesn't really work for me, or yeah, I thought about it that way instead of this way. How do you answer? How do you respond in such a
Right.
situation?
Right. So the standard Zig Ziglar response, which is the selling from the 50s and 60s, is basically these are objections, and selling is all about managing objections. But back then it was more, oh, so you asked me that question. I have my answer for you, and here's where it is. What people are basically doing, and the way that I speak to my salespeople, is they're playing mental chess with you. Most salespeople who panic because they suddenly think that the emperor has no clothes and they've suddenly been found out. Well, what happened to all the years of training and everything you have invested in your product and your service that somebody can literally tear it down in 4 seconds and tell you they can get the exact same thing for 4 cents less? So the place you could go is, first off, is the following. I go by one general rule first, which is if I don't like somebody's question, I wait for them to ask it a second time. If a client asks a question twice, then it has to be answered. If they've asked it once, it's potentially a prompt, it's a move on, or it's a change direction. So that's a bit of a mental gymnastics type situation, but it's human nature. So it's not answering, it's using it as a springboard for something else, because oftentimes it's mental, it's just somebody's literally vomiting something out, and they're doing, that's a natural reaction. I could get it cheaper. So you can fall for it and say, oh, really, where? Or you could say, a lot of people often mention that. I did want to mention something else to you, though, and you move on. If somebody asks it twice, then what you have to think about is what is it that you're actually selling and discussing? And you look at somebody, in a lot of cases, you say, that's interesting you would say that. Just as an example, what is it that you think I'm actually bringing to you here? Well, isn't it just that widget for 20 cents? Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Actually, what you're talking about is correct. That is about 20 cents. But what it is we're talking about here is actually XYZ, or it's these things, or it has a service with it. Or if you don't want the following things added with it, that is probably what it is. But do you know how to manage that piece? And it's a challenge back. What do you mean manage it? Well, if you were buying that on your own, I assume you know how much you need for next month, the month after, because you don't want to overdo. You don't want to. There's a whole series. You have to know your product, and I can play with anybody's product. It all doesn't help at that moment. So what you're really asking is how do you prevent yourself from panicking? You prevent yourself from panicking by having a lot of experience and not panicking, and smiling. If all else fails, and I'll just go to the bottom line, this is old school, but it works every single time you do the pushback, which is also old school, which is, you know what, you're right. I don't think this is going to work for you. I am so sorry if I wasted your time on this. I have 4 other meetings, though. I do want to see you again at some point. Thank you so much for everything. I appreciate it. Wait a second. What? So that does actually work if you do it nicely and sincerely. But if somebody doesn't leave you alone, never let yourself get beaten up. Never reduce your price to a level where you're not making any money. And don't sit and grovel for business. Say, thank you very much. You obviously do not want what it is I'm selling. I so appreciate your time, but I'm not going to make any money here. And that's the only reason I'm here, is to work to try to help you. And this is my business. This is my job. And you've just given me a gift. It's something that you don't need. Thank you.
Great response. So we know sales is very uncomfortable for people, right? It's a very uncomfortable thing, and people try to minimize uncomfortable experiences as much as possible. And in today's day and age, we try to use digital marketing and we try to use all kinds of marketing strategies just to avoid getting in front of that person and answering those difficult questions, right? And so the question is more, well, what's the right balance between both to be able to properly execute, right? How relevant is still that face to face today with the individual versus, hiding behind all your marketing and your social media marketing and your SEO
Right.
marketing and all that stuff, which we know that inherently they're two professions that are totally different. And in the old school realm, sales hate marketers, marketers hate sales because they keep blaming it on each other, right? Why something is not moving. And yet today, for some reason, maybe out of the anxiety, the fear, of uncomfortableness, they seem to be combining them together, joining them together, and they feel that just marketing in all these different ways is enough and should be enough to be able to achieve those results or those goals.
Right. Right. So the first question I usually ask on a marketing campaign or where you're talking about something like that is, how's that going for you? Is it working or not? Even in the days of mass mailing, etc., the returns were below 5%, and these days it's below 1%. So to get a below 1% return that makes you any money means you have to invest millions of dollars in the actual initial outlay of what happens. So if you didn't send out 10 million mailers or 10 million samples, your 1% is not going to mean anything. So that's first off. Second of all, generationally speaking, as your buyers begin to retire and new buyers take over, face-to-face may not be the way things work. We may be actually getting a tremendous gift in what's happened here from the perspective of all of these things happening online, and you're having to establish yourself who's somebody that's comfortable selling digitally. And what I mean selling digitally versus what you were talking about is just putting things out there, which is just what we're doing now, which is I'm a talking head on a screen. I could potentially have charts and graphs available. Maybe we could use Microsoft Teams and draw things and have a whiteboard and have different ways of having this meeting. But even without a pandemic, you may be selling to a 20-something who has no interest whatsoever in speaking to you in person ever, because that's not what they do. So you need to learn how to text people with relevant things that get you the responses that there. You need to be able to engage in online on platforms and social media that get you what you need and engage the world in relevant ways, which isn't, once again, taking what worked somewhere else, which might have been a billboard on 95 saying fireworks exit 5, and they'll just put fireworks exit 5 on LinkedIn or Facebook or somewhere else. It has to have something that has relevance and connectivity to what it is that you're doing. So is it a blog that shows your expertise? Is it, my son explained to me the whole idea of giveaways and different things that people do on Instagram and other places, which sound goofy to us. But when you show 1 million people that you're giving away a pair of sneakers to the first 100 people, people will do it. I mean, we have an entire generation that'll put their social security card online because they just don't understand. But maybe we're old school and it's actually safe. I don't know. I haven't proven it yet, and mine's still, here. I'm not giving it out. But those different ways of engaging people, it's a fluid process right now. So the answer to your question is you have to get over, let me say it a different way. Just because you own a business doesn't mean that you could sell your product. Let's say it that way. You may have developed an amazing product and you may have been able to sell it to, introduce it to, or explain it to what became your early adapters, to go into the world of your MBA, if you will, your early adapters and your pioneers. But beyond that, the people that actually saw it initially and realized they had a need for it and spent all that time with you on your first buyers, that next group needs somebody to actually do some selling. And you may not be a salesperson. Bill Gates is not the #1 salesperson at Microsoft, nor was he. But then when you had, the top salesperson take over HP, he only lasted, 8 months. But the person who's running IBM right now, Ginny, came from sales. So it depends on where people's strengths are and what they can do. But the real challenge is to a business owner is how much respect do you have for the sales process? If you just think anybody can do it, you're setting yourself up for failure and you're not really looking at your business. If you recognize that sales is a profession and that professional salespeople are not just people that speak well, schmooze or play golf or take people out to dinner and spend a lot of money, but actually understand human behavior, understand how to communicate with people, understand how to help people see what it is that they need, and they're the people somebody will pay $500 to $1,000 an hour because they're experts. When you realize that, then you're actually ready to build your business. That's actually the answer that I would give you.
Beautiful. Any other questions from the audience? Please.
I hope we have an audience. My mother didn't call in.
We have 21 members right now inside, so it's good.
Somebody else asked a question. Poor Alan was the only one who asked the question. Somebody else. I'm going to start calling on people. That could be embarrassing. Who's there? Victor Rakin. You can ask a question. Duvy, Gil, Morty, Sivia. Somebody ask a question. All you got to do is type in the little box on the bottom right. What else can I tell you? Jonathan, what else do you want me to tell you?
What else? What else? What's a average amount? You know, somebody's building his business or he's trying to grow it, right? And he has his goals. What's is there an average amount of calls a person needs to be making every single day, right? To
Right.
average out something. Is there a percentage? Is there a rule of thumb to sales that tells you, okay, if I want to reach, 10 successful clients, I got to call 1,000. I got to call
Right.
100. I got to call 500.
I'll
How does
give you
that?
two. I'll give you two things that I teach my people by that I've had. One is behavioral, and one is best practice on something. Normally, a Fortune 500 win percentage and renewal percentage, meaning I intend to win X percent. Fortune 500 best practice is between 25 and 35% as a win percentage, meaning when I go to see a new client, if I see 100 people, I expect to close 25 to 35% of those deals. Now that's aggressive on 100. You have to start with a bigger number to start with. But as you begin to get going, that would be an expectation on a new business win perspective. Renewal perspective, I'm a 90 plus guy. Oftentimes, corporate America models at about 82% or so, 82 to 85% from what I've seen. I believe you can get your renewals above 90% if you know what you're doing. For goodness sake, you should be at 99% if you're selling a good product and people need it. So you need to do the math backwards as to what you need to do that. The initial 100 people you call, you're not going to close those first 25 or 35. That's going to be a larger number. But as you begin cycling through, you get smarter so that the 100 calls you make, if you will, just to put it as calls or contacts or whatever you do, get refined to at least be in the warmer category. What I mean is, as you're starting off with your widget, you may call your first 10 phone calls. Well, you're going to learn potentially what position you're selling to in a company. You may learn that you need a manufacturer with more than 50 employees. You accidentally, your first 9 calls were only 10 employees because they're not big. You saw that their annual sales were 10 million. You need annual sales of 50 million. You saw somebody was manufacturing, they were putting metal things together. You need people that are actually smelting metal. You need people that are doing more of something. You're going to learn that in the beginning. The second thing is really what it is you need in a salesperson. So the most successful salespeople I know, and one of the best pieces of information I got when I started selling, and I went from being a practicing lawyer to being in sales. So you can imagine the fun my mother had with that. So the advice I got was decide what your daily goal is. So the person that gave me this advice said, this was an insurance salesman. He had his own insurance company, but he said when he woke up in the morning, he was going to do one of 3 things and then he could go to sleep that night. So the first thing was he was going to cold call enough to get 2 new appointments. So whatever that meant for that day, whether it was 2 calls or 100 calls, he wasn't going to stop dialing or whatever it was he was doing until he had 2 appointments set. He got through to 2 people that he was going to see, which is, for those of you that do cold calling, that ain't easy. That's 1. 2, he had a day where he was in the field. So whatever that maximum number of appointments is, that's what the day was. So when I started selling, it was 4 appointments a day. In the car, driving around to industrial complexes, selling my product. 4 calls a day was what I was doing. 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, or maybe one morning, a lunch, and then 2 more in the afternoon or a coffee, whatever. 4 appointments. Or the best day, you close a deal. You wake up 9:30 in the morning, you close a deal, you're done. That's it. Go do something else. So that's what he said would be a successful day. And you have to have the discipline to not either put down the phone, get out of the car, put down your computer, or do whatever you're doing until one of those 3 things. And if you're doing one of those 3 things on a daily basis, you're an extremely successful business person. And I've seen that still holds true. I train my salespeople that way. And now I work with salespeople that have, minimum 10 years experience in my industry, in the energy industry. And that's the type of days that people have. And when they're starting to slip, that's the question we ask them. What does your day look like? What are your goals? What are you doing? So that's how I'd answer that. That's a long answer to a short question.
Great advice. We have another question by Alan. So he says, even post-COVID, whenever that may be, do you think that video selling training is part of the new normal for the long term?
So the answer is, I would tape yourself first and get a few people to look at it. If you want to email it to me, you're welcome to, or text it to me. You can get the information from Jonathan or from Avi. But video yourself for 20 seconds, being comfortable and just talking. Then video yourself for 20 seconds talking about your business a bit and get somebody to critique you. The first critique is background. The next critique is foreground. The next critique is voice. The next critique is, do I understand what you're actually saying? Did you understand what the person, does somebody understand what you said for those 20 seconds? And that's where you begin the process of, is video working for you and how do you get better at it? But the only way you get better is by asking people for gifts. And the gifts you're asking for is 100% honesty and criticism. So you can pay somebody a couple $100 an hour to critique your video, and I'm sure they're very good at it. But you can at least start with people that you know and love, that you trust, and say, I want you to say something bad about this. I know I'm wonderful. Tell me something bad. I didn't like the way that you looked. Well, what do you mean? Suit didn't look good. Great. What looks better on video? Thank you. Your voice wasn't clear. Okay. How's this? How's that? How's this? You start to do that process. I found out on video calls that it's better for me to have the AirPods in, because the way that my voice comes and what you can hear is better than the echoing in the room. So hopefully you can hear me well. And I'm big on modulation and being able to do a little shtick while I'm talking, because it helps me stay awake. And I find that it engages somebody when we're talking. See, you looked. But those little things are something that you have to think about and do. For I do large meetings with my team, 100 people on the phone. I always play music when it starts. I also give fair warning to the people when I'm having a group meeting that if I know you're on the call, you're fair game. If you're multitasking, you do so at your own risk. I'm going to call on you potentially. So you need to know that I may be asking you something. And that's more of a management style. But from a selling perspective, start with people you trust critiquing 20 seconds worth of video. And if you still see that something's not working, you could potentially engage a professional, or also look online. There are a lot of how-tos on things. You can look on my thing on YouTube as well on Gilt, G-Y-L-T. I have a 5-minute session on that, which expands on what I just said. Once again, not an advertisement for me. It's my 18-year-old's business project. So he loves the feedback.
Amazing. Andrew, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For all this advice.
Thank you to you as well. You also took of your own time.
It's unbelievable.
Canadian time, which is even longer. Yes.
There you go. Montreal. And if you want to maybe just leave a few inspiring words or something for people to take with them before we end this call, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So what I would leave everybody with is the following. There's a reason that we're all in this right now, and you can either get upset about it and say, why me, and blame this situation for anything that's going wrong, even if the math all adds up, or you can break your teeth and figure out how to take advantage of what is in front of us right now. And if you can spend the time and think through what else is out there, get outside of yourself, get outside of the box that you're in, and look at yourself and your business from the outside and think about it. And use that word. I hate pithy statements, but use the word pivot. What is the pivot? What's the fear you always had of somebody else before this disrupting your business? Oh my gosh, I sell diamonds. What if somebody sells it for $1 less? That's what you were scared of. But now when you think about it, what are you actually scared of? And what would you be telling you to do? You have to step outside and look at what you're doing critically, and then challenge yourself slowly. Change is slow, if at all. Small steps, and set a goal for yourself every single day and be disciplined. Change what it is that you're doing so that the world isn't changing you and you're making the changes for yourself. Measure it, follow it, compliment yourself, and smile once in a while, and be successful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrew.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And
pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of the day in the conference.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best.